As you know, Bhaskara Sutta means that he is from West Bengal, he's a Bengali. But while he was here, apparently learned Kannada and started poetry in it. He still writes, maybe I don't know. Is that right?
Not in Kannada.
Not in Kannada, but you wrote some poems in Kannada, one or two. One. But that's a lot, right? Can anybody who speaks Kannada write a poetry here? He has a flair for languages. That includes our technical language, technical writing. He also is a very careful reader. Now that he has passed Sangamesh, I can say that he took 7 months to read his thesis. Anyway, I think he went through so carefully the entire thesis, I must say more than I did, because he said this triangle is referred to as capital B, small b, C, where it should have been capital C, capital A, capital C. He went through every figure, every equation, I must say every word. So he has a lot of respect for writing, and we are fortunate today to listen to this talk from him, who has a lot of respect for technical writing. Without much ado.
This I will not need.
No, we are
For
recording.
recording, it will be needed.
Yes.
Where is it optimally put?
Far from your mobile phone. Possible.
Mobile phone can go far.
Yeah. Yes.
First, it's nice to come to the alma mater and give a lecture, and it is nicer to have a house full. So this is part of what I typically cover in a course in our department called communication skills. In that course on communication skills, we try to handle a lot of things. Password it is asking for. Suresh? Okay, I should keep on clicking, otherwise it will go off. So in that course on communication skills, we try to do a lot of things, and in that at some point in the semester, we try to cover this typical structure of a technical paper. So in that, these are the things that should typically appear in a technical paper, and I am trying to talk about them one by one. But before that, I should first point out that for any technical document, whether it is paper or report or thesis or book, you typically need to follow a formal language style. For book, it is not so constraining, but in that form, the elements of that formal style is this: first, that you have to use passive voice, preferably always, but practically to the extent possible. And expressing things in passive voice is a lot of trouble in English. Sometimes students find it very difficult to put straightforward active voice sentences into passive voice. That has to be practiced, learnt. Okay, so that is the typical way the technical things should be written. And typically for oneself, one should use third person, the present author. You should not keep on cluttering the paper with I did that, I check it, and so on. That is considered not right. Okay, so you use the present author, and if you use the passive voice, then many times, many cases, the present author is completely eliminated. Okay, and there is a difference between authors and the present authors in some context. For example, suppose you are writing your paper as yourself and your guide, or yourself, your colleague and your guide. Okay, so there is a case for the present authors, and there is a authors. Both you can use to indicate yourselves, but then at the same time, if you are talking about the work of some other people, then they are the authors, and in juxtaposition to that, you are putting your effort, that is, you are talking about the present authors. So sometimes students write things in which it becomes very complicated to understand what do they mean by this. So that distinction should be clear whenever two sets of authors are in picture. And of course, you should adhere to formal languages, formal language constructs, rather than coming back to colloquial and the typical things that you use among friends. For example, when you use colloquial, you should not write didn't, can't, ain't is of course not acceptable. Okay, you write did not, cannot, and SMS language like these should be strictly avoided. Okay, and I already mentioned use of I to be avoided. I did this, I experimented with these parameter values, this is strictly out. But sometimes you end up using we. We cannot be avoided altogether, and there are two cases of using we. For example, when you read a textbook of some technical topic, say solid mechanics, then the author says, let us consider this system, let us consider a 2D stress strain situation and so on. When the author says let us consider, in that us, he is including himself and you, the author and the reader. In that context, using we, us, etc. is perfectly fine, acceptable. But too many uses of we in order to denote the authors of the current paper also should be avoided to the extent possible. You see, this plural of I, in English it is only we, but I think in Tamil there are two versions of we. One we is we, all of us, and the second we is to include the first person and second person together, I and you. I and you, that plural as we is also another meaning of we. So in the sense of I and you, using we, let us consider, is perfectly valid, perfectly acceptable. So you need to understand that difference, and you need to use care, and of course write simple English. This is one important thing which is very difficult to tell to those people who know a lot of English. Okay, so rather than using a sentence having 35 words and one word of that having an average of this is troublesome, one word in that having an average of 7 or 8 letters is not the demonstration of good English, it is a demonstration of an inability of avoiding bombasts. Okay, so write simple sentences, and in that simple words to the extent possible. Sometimes you may have to use words which are not simple but which give correct expression to what you try to say, then use that, but do not use complicated, less used words only for the sake of it. Okay, so write simple English, avoid bombasts, and avoid long winding sentences. Sometimes you may need to pack up quite a bit of material, quite a bit of message in a single sentence for the correct expression. You may do that, it is your privilege, it is your authority as the author, but then to the extent possible, for the sake of your readers, for the sake of your piece being more popular, more read, it is important that you avoid long winding sentences as long as possible unless it is necessary, and make small sentences which are easily understood by the reader. Understand that you may be proud of your English, but the reader is not proud of his English. Okay, he is very simple minded person who follows only simple things. Does he not have a right to what you write? You accept his right also to read and understand your writings, and accordingly write for him. Okay, and always make it a point that what you write technically as well as editorially, as well as from the English perspective, should be perfectly understandable for your junior. Okay, do not write for professors, do not write for scholars, write for your junior who will read through your thesis, your paper, in order to learn something so that he can do something on his own in the same line. So write for your junior. Okay, so and therefore write in such a manner that he understands. Okay, avoid rhetoric. This is something which I myself find very difficult, since my first love is not engineering, not science. My first love is literature. So given an opportunity, I would love to use as much rhetoric as possible. Okay, so trying to make the writing interesting, beautiful, and dramatic. But in technical writings, unfortunately, you can't do that. Okay, you try to be factual. Okay, so sometimes you may induce, sometimes you may bring in some beautiful expression, but then never put beauty in a technical language at the cost of correctness of expression. If you have put some irony, some exaggeration, which are supposed to be great figures of speech in literature, in order to occlude the understanding of the science behind it to your readers, then it is a failure. Okay, so you should avoid rhetoric to the extent possible, and certainly not use rhetoric, not use dramatic in order to at the cost of the correct meaning. Yes, this is some complicated term, complicated issue, trade-off between truth and diplomacy. This is something which we need to do whenever we write a technical paper for consumption among the scholastic audience among in the world. So there you need to make claims that my work does this, in the present work this has been reported, this has been achieved. So you need to put something which is the achievement of this particular paper, otherwise this particular paper does not get accepted and does not get published. Okay. So but then sometimes you have to say your things correctly, and in every piece of work that you report there will be weaknesses, there will be limitations, there will be issues which this paper could not settle, though it would be nice to have settled. Okay. So there you need to use a little diplomacy to ensure that because of that reason the paper does not get rejected. Okay. So there a lot of care is needed to make the trade-off between truth and diplomacy. For example, if your paper is 8 pages long, and in 3 pages you describe in how many situations your work has failed to solve this problem, that aspect, then you don't expect that paper to be accepted, right? So you put forward in good detail whatever your paper achieves, whatever your work achieves, but in some appropriate contexts, in 2-3 paragraphs wherever appropriate, you need to mention that these are the limitations of your paper. So that shows your maturity, that at least you know the limitations of your paper. Okay. So there you need to appeal to the truth that your paper does not solve the problem completely. So this is something which has to be handled carefully. And of course this I put in all capital always, do not plagiarize. Okay. There are various forms of plagiarisms. Some is of course blatantly criminal in nature, that somebody spots the opportunity to lift a piece and quite categorically lifts it consciously. That is of course very bad. But then there are times when inadvertently some people end up plagiarizing, though they did not know that they are plagiarizing. What happens is that while writing your piece, you keep several things on your table, on your desk, scattered as a reference. Okay. And then you are starting to write, and as you write you feel, oh, what was this? So you pick up one reference and consult it. Oh yes, this is the thing which has to come in this place now. And now you find that expression of what you are trying to put very well expressed in that, so you put the whole thing here. This is plagiarism, which is not with the intention of making plagiarism, but with the intention of putting the correct or best expression that you can think of, and unfortunately what you can think of as best is already written by somebody else. But this is also plagiarism. You have to be careful in avoiding that. For that I offer a methodology to my students to avoid even this kind of plagiarism. For that you have to compartmentalize the time of reading and the time of writing. So when you are reading references, when you are reading other material, you keep a notebook with you and you make notes. In the notes you do not write full sentences as picked up from that source. You write only bullets in your own language. You write only bullets, keywords, which you are likely to forget. The things that you will remember from the thing anyway, you don't bother to write. The key point that you are likely to forget, just put a star mark and put that. Okay. 3 words, 2 words, okay, 1 expression, 1 equation, okay, and 1 quick sketch with your own pencil. Okay. That notebook you keep. After these things are done, after you have included all the things from whatever resources, whatever references you had to consult, then take all these things, all these references and prints and whatnot together and put in the cupboard, close the cupboard. Okay. With you now you have only your notebook with all these notes, and then you start writing. Okay. That way you will not end up in inadvertent plagiarism. And plagiarism is bad in several respects. It is worse from a selfish point of view, that it might ruin your career, but even not go to that penal issues at all. You should make it a matter of pride that when I write, every sentence, every phrase, every clause is mine. Okay. With that pride you write, you keep in mind somewhere that I don't take a single paisa from anybody. Okay. With that pride in your mind, you write everything which is original. And this particular exercise that I told you is in order to safeguard against the possibility that somebody else visited you and by mistake left a packet of biscuits on your table and left, forgot it, and then later you did not notice that this packet of biscuit was bought by somebody else and you ended up eating it. Okay. So in order to avoid even that possibility, the moment you find that there is an alien packet of biscuit, keep it inside the cupboard, write the visitor's name and forget about it. Okay. Then you eat your own biscuits. Okay. So that is what I am trying to advise you. Yes. Do not forget to conduct at least 2 rounds of spelling check, grammar check, style check and every check at the end of writing, I say once manually and once with a program. And why so? Once with a program you do, that is a good habit, because human eyes have a limitation. Okay. So because too many, when you read particularly your own writing, okay, you have a tendency to glide over it, slip over it and not notice small mistakes here and there. For that I also advise that whatever you write, you at least get it read through 2 trusted friends who are so good friends that they can happily criticize you, okay, without jeopardizing the friendship. Okay. So manually when you do, you have that limitation, that slipping. Okay. So if the program is there, it will always capture topology as topology and not as topology. So for topology, if you have written topology, it will catch you. Okay. But then one round you should do manually also, because you cannot rely on any program to do a spell check when you have written FORM when you meant FROM, because from is a word, form is also a word. Spell check will not handle that. Okay. It will say fine, no problem, but then meaning is confused. Okay. So that is why one manual check and one software check is important. So these are a few things which are there for the style of anything that you write. And now we come to the technical paper. First thing, as you all know, is the title of the paper. So the title, what title to put for a paper, that is also a troublesome business. So these things you can keep in mind. The title should not be too long, but should reflect the theme correctly, including the contribution as well as limitations. So contributions, in what way? You can say a complete solution to the problem, complete word has come, because in last 30 years many other researchers have offered some solution. Now you have been lucky and you have been capable of finding a complete solution of a problem which has eluded the research community for 30 years. So that complete word should come in the title. A complete solution to the problem of, then you say the such and such problem with holonomic constraints. Now this holonomic adjective is telling the limitation, because you are perhaps not able to handle the non-holonomic constraints. Okay. So otherwise you see that if you do not include that word complete, then in the first round nobody will give it the respect that it deserves, because in last 30 years 70 solutions have been proposed. Nobody will notice from the title that your solution is complete solution. On the other hand, if you do not put the holonomic constraint, holonomic word there, then somebody will criticize that from the title you are trying to tell them that you are solving it with all kinds of constraints, but in actual fact your algorithm, your method does not handle non-holonomic constraints. So that will be a blame on you that you are lying to the research community. Okay. So it should mention the strengths as well as limitation, contribution as well as limitation, but not at the cost of too long. Okay. So these mutually conflicting requirements you have to keep in mind and make the best trade-off for settling for the title of paper. Okay. My first paper was named as a canonical formulation of whatever. Okay. So I was very particular about keeping that word canonical, and when these people, Divakar and my guide and others, objected to what is the correct meaning of the word canonical, I think Divakar objected to that. I went and consulted a dictionary and ensured that the canonical word makes sense there. Okay. So after the title you come to the authors. This is fairly straightforward and nothing, no big deal there. You write it in this manner, okay, with affiliations and addresses, including email addresses. Some styles of journals and conferences expect the details like addresses etc. with footnote, okay, as footnote. I think this can be increased a little, control plus, right? No, it is not increasing. From the back row you can see everything? Okay, I think this is better. Okay. So, what should go in the abstract? Abstract is typically supposed to be short. If possible in one paragraph, at most two if really necessary. And in the abstract you should try to capture in brief the purpose and theme of the paper, the central idea, whatever breakthrough or achievement has been made in the paper, that should appear here, okay. And towards the end you should mention what is the utility of this paper, that is what is the advantage, what humanity gains by having this contribution made, what is the contribution here, okay, what is its utility, how is it useful, and what is its value. And in that, important point is, all through this paragraph or these two paragraphs you should keep in mind that it should be able, this abstract should be able to attract that particular reader to whom this particular paper has a value, okay. So first round, when people search for papers to read or not to read, they look at the title. Only those people who have decided based on the title that they should go a little deeper into your paper, only they will read this abstract. And at this stage, at the abstract stage, you should capture your correct audience. And when I say that when you should capture your correct audience, it means that you should capture the audience who should be the audience of this, and you should not capture audience who should not be reading this, because that is also a big problem, okay. So there are people who don't need your paper, okay, and so do not give too much details for them, okay. So important point is to attract a potential reader with the exact expectation from the complete paper. So if the reader, after getting attracted from the title, reads the abstract and then feels like going into the paper, then only you get the correct reader, okay. So with that intention in mind, you write this abstract. And what to avoid? Too much details about your work, and certainly wrong claims, flamboyant, grandiloquent claims you should avoid, which is not being done. Citations typically you should not include in abstract, okay, that can go for the body of the paper. Citations in this itself, actual references of Thomson and Johnson 34 is to be avoided in abstract, okay. One advice that I can give you is that write the abstract after you have written the whole paper, okay. In a way, that is the meaning of the word abstract, it is as if the paper was there, and from that paper whatever you could abstract, in the sense of extracting a little bit in, you know, the key point, okay. So after writing the full paper, then you write the abstract, because not that since it is appearing here, so you should be writing this before all these things. Don't do that. That way a typical abstract is not written nicely. An abstract is very important, so after writing it you should sharpen it twice by thorough critical revision. After abstract you will need to put keywords, and understand that this is another point where search is conducted for decision of whether to include your paper or not to include your paper in reading material or in a database or wherever, okay. So it is important for potential reader, more important for the editor, because when editor receives your paper, he has to decide the correct reviewer, okay, to whom he should send it for review. So you should list the keywords from which the editor will know who will be good expert of these things. And then most important for indexing purposes, when your paper after publication gets indexed, then these keywords are going to help in that job, okay. After keywords you will put a nomenclature or list of symbols, or not put. If in your paper the number of terms, number of symbols that is coming is 7 or 8, okay, then perhaps you can avoid putting another nomenclature. It may not make sense. On the other hand, if your paper has some 56 symbols all over the 30 pages of the paper, then you better put a nomenclature, otherwise it will be a lot of trouble, because the reader will get lost in the forest of all these symbols. So important symbols and their meanings in tabular form you should put for ready reference at this stage. Okay. Important symbols, particularly those which are appearing in many places in the paper. Extremely local symbol, that is at some point, in order to denote something for next 2 inches, next 1 paragraph and 2 equations, you use a symbol phi. So that need not appear in the nomenclature. So some extremely local symbols can be explained in the context and not load the nomenclature. As I told, nomenclature may not be needed if the number of symbols is very less, in which case whenever the symbol is appearing first time, there you define it clearly. Okay. After all these preliminaries, you are going to write you are writing these things much earlier, but after all these preliminaries, your actual text of the paper is going to appear. A typical first section of a technical paper is introduction. Okay. Now I put a question mark here because some journal styles will require you not to number the section. So this one may not come, it will be simply introduction, and some other journal styles will require you to number the sections, so there it will be one introduction. A typical form of the first section of a paper will first include this one small paragraph on what this paper is about in a nutshell. Okay. After that is done in a short paragraph, then you will put a few more paragraphs, one or more paragraphs on the details regarding whatever points this small paragraph small paragraph raised, that may have included terms and words the meaning of which is not known to everybody. Okay. And in the meaning of which, in the issues of which you have something important to say. So those things in terms of details should come here in one or more paragraphs. After reading this and expecting what this paper contains, and after reading these paragraphs, knowing that indeed the paper handles these things, then the reader will need to know what others have done before your paper appeared in the scene. So over a few paragraphs, you conduct a general review of the literature in the field with special mention, with special emphasis on those aspects which are important for what you are going to do in this paper. Okay. So overall you review the field in general, and out of that general review you should pick up points which are going to have a bearing, which are going to have some relevance for what you are going to report in this particular paper. So in that you should go in more detail, and perhaps in those aspects you should cover more literature also in the journals and conferences and even textbooks. Okay. So you present a general and special, general and particular literature review in this place. And while you write this general this literature review part, it is important to use your assessment, your own assessment of what some other authors, what some other researchers have done in past, not what they have claimed or not what somebody else has said about them. So this is one point where many students in the beginning stage, many beginner scholars make a mistake of simply writing whatever that other author writes in his abstract or in his conclusion. This is partly due to the inability, due to the failure of this present author to make out what the other author is doing really. So if such a question is there, then you should first figure out what that other paper is doing. So there is I mean this trouble comes also because of the laziness of the student, that he doesn't want to read somebody else's paper 3 times. Because first reading he did not understand, second time he did not read thoroughly, and third time reading he says that if I keep on reading papers written by others, when I will publish my own paper. Okay, this is a problem. So you have to handle this, but you need to figure out what that paper is doing, okay, rather than just mentioning that okay, he has done this because he has mentioned so in his paper. Okay, don't do that. So use your assessment of the contribution of the literature or the published paper in the literature. So use your appraisal regarding others' work and use absolute standard. For example, some author has used alpha constraint method as his term. Now in my paper, if I write that Johnson and Nicholson used alpha constraint method in order to solve this problem, my reader does not understand what is alpha constraint method. Alpha constraint method was coined with a lot of love by those authors in order to give a name to their algorithm. Okay, and in the entire paper they have written alpha constraint method. Now if I also say that such and such authors used alpha constraint method, developed alpha constraint method to solve this problem, my reader gets absolutely no information. What is that alpha constraint method in the terminology of the general field? I need to interpret, and then accordingly I need to say that these authors used a relaxation of constraints with perturbation in order to whatever it may mean. Okay, this will mean something to the reader. Okay, so the standard terms we need to use, not the terms which one particular set of authors have coined and trying to popularize in one particular paper. Okay, that will give no information to my reader. And of course, again, do not lift lines from their papers. This is something which, because of the inability to develop an appraisal of a paper, sometimes students do, that they don't understand very clearly what these authors have done, so they simply say that okay, be fair to them and write whatever they have done. So don't do that. So they lift the entire line. Okay, they don't do that. Okay, that is wrong. So their lines, by lifting their lines, first you will be doing plagiarism. Second, you will be giving them perhaps more credit than they have done. In their paper they may not have actually made that achievement, but they are claiming in a peculiar manner that they have achieved it. Okay, and you will be giving that, and particularly you will be giving that credit without knowing whether that credit is really due. Okay, so in the context of giving credits, you can be critical in your comments, but fair. That is, you can highlight the limitation of a published paper, because if you do not highlight the published paper's limitation, then you will not be able to sell your paper as needed, because if the published work in that field has no limitation, has completely solved the problem, then why are you doing this work? Why are you writing your paper? Okay, so you have to point out the limitations of the published literature, but you have to be fair. You have to give the proper credit to those to whom it belongs. Okay, and always keep this in mind. Do not take published papers at face value. All of us have been children, all of us have been students, and we are students all through our life. So there is a lot of trust on what Papa says, there is a lot of trust what ma'am says, and there is a lot of trust in printed matter. Okay, something is printed, that means it is true. It is not so. Whatever Papa says doesn't have to be true. Whatever is printed doesn't have to be true. Okay, so keep this spirit of skepticism that okay, these authors say that this is so. Do not take the published paper at face value, because of three reasons. One is that the authors may be thinking that they have solved the problem completely, but three sub cases they may not have noticed. Okay, so what they are telling is not completely right. Second is that authors are telling that they have solved it in this case, this case, this case, but since communication is faulty, you are getting the picture, because those are the cases which he is highlighting, you are getting the picture that they have solved all cases. What other case could arise? Okay, so these are reasons because of which the face value is not always the right value. Okay, so you do not need to take the, and for that matter, the third reason is that we should accept that in our time a lot of junk authors are actually publishing a lot of junk which is not at all right. Okay, and if you take printed matter as gospel truth, then you will be inducing all that untruth in your own brain, and that is very bad. Rather than learning and knowing things which are wrong, it is better not to learn, not to know. Okay, so you, whenever you read something, even newspapers, particularly newspapers for that matter, particular newspapers for that matter, you should keep in mind that printed matter doesn't have to be taken at face value. Same is for published papers also. After this literature review part is through, then you need to put at least one paragraph or a little more in order to identify gaps and lacunae in the literature. And if you are smart, if you are a good writer, then during this phase you would have laid the groundwork for that. Okay. So when you are doing the literature review, rather than being non-committal and general, you might have slipped out, let out indications that here it is not complete, here it is not right, here it requires some extension. So such hints you must have put here if you are smart in your writing. And now you consolidate that and identify clear gaps where the literature is lacking, and particularly those gaps where your paper is supposed to contribute. And this way you will establish that the work that you have done was worth doing, that was warranted, that was needed, that was a crying need of the hour. Okay. So like that you put your thing in context. Okay. And then you are on your saddle, you are starting. Now you say one paragraph to clearly specifying the exact issue that present paper handles out of 3-4 different issues that got identified from here as to be done work. Perhaps this is the exercise which you did in the first 1 year of your PhD. Okay. That is, you read through the literature and I try to identify gap where to do some work and earn a PhD degree. Okay. So in a way that is getting reflected here. So here, out of all these issues which are needed to be handled, you now specify clearly what exact issue this paper handles. Okay. So in more concrete terms than what you did here. Here you were addressing a newcomer, and here you are talking to a person who is no more a newcomer. He has read 5 paragraphs from here. What you have contributed, that must have got a lot. Okay. So now here you are talking to a person who has got a feeling of the problem being discussed. So here in more clear cut terms you mention what you are doing. Okay. And then at the end of this introduction section, it is a good idea to put section 2 does this has been done in section 3 and so on. So a section wise outline of the paper you put here. And now here we have talked about a lot paragraphs. Okay. So when you are writing continuous text, you also need to spend a little time in order to work out the paragraph structure. As you know, that paragraph structure of whatever we have discussed till now, if 4 of you tries to write the introduction section of a particular paper, then the paragraph structure of them will be different. Okay. So that is quite flexible, and wherever there is a lot of flexibility, there is a lot of decision, and based on what you will take the decision, that is confusing. If somebody puts all of that in single paragraph, that will be very bad. On the other hand, if you put too many paragraphs but not according to a theme, that also will be bad. So whenever you write something, technical or non-technical, paragraph structure is an issue. Okay. In any document, the paragraph structure has 2 aspects. One is subject, one is size. Inordinately long paragraph is also not good. Okay. And on the other hand, just in order to have shorter paragraphs, a continuous long thing breaking somewhere in 3 equal parts is also not a good idea, right? So if your typical paragraph is 7 line long, but there is a paragraph which is appearing which is 21 line long, you cut it in 7 line, of course nobody will do such a madness. Okay. So what is not madness? What you should do? So based on these 2 things, subject and size, you make this checklist. This is something which I have never done consciously, but subconsciously I have done a few times, and I feel that this is a very good thing to do. Whenever you write something, ask these 2 questions for every paragraph. One is, what does this paragraph deal with? Like you put a title for a section, a title for a chapter, a title for a subsection. Think of a title for a paragraph. Don't write it. Okay. So when you are writing, when you are proofreading your written thing, for every paragraph on the margin, think up some title for this paragraph. If I were forced to give a title to this particular paragraph, what would be the title of that? In the margin write it. If you can successfully write clear cut titles for every paragraph that you have written, that means your paragraph structure is perhaps very good. Okay. On the other hand, sometimes you will feel that for this paragraph I cannot put a title because one title does not do justice to it. There are three different things handled here. Okay, that is one possibility. Another possibility is that how come I am giving this title to this paragraph, because part of this title is being handled in the previous paragraph as well as the next paragraph. That means that your title paragraph structure is faulty. Okay, so ask this question: what does this paragraph deal with? Okay, so if every paragraph can be assigned a particular title, that is a particular issue that it is handling, then paragraph is good. And what is the succession of items or issues or aspects my document should have at this stage? At this stage of my document, what should be the order in which things are going to be communicated? You ask yourself this question. Okay, so if you do this exercise again and again for every paragraph, then slowly you will see that your paragraphs are converging by cutting here, getting included there, by changing of order of several things, which will make your logic more direct, more clear. You can handle this better. Okay, so this is a conscious exercise which has to be done. Regarding this title for paragraph, I have read some books in which the authors do this actually. The title, I mean a short topic of the paragraph actually appears in the margin. That is very helpful. And I remember reading some piece by Vivekanand, Swami Vivekanand, where he mentions an interesting thing. In train, when he was going from one place to another, on the way he was quickly brushing through a lot of his own writings, a lot of contemporary other writings, Indian and Western, and a few copies of Upanishads and so on. Okay, overnight he was going to quickly make review and notes for his lecture next morning, and what he was carrying with him were volumes. Okay, so one disciple of his asked, how can you read so much in so little time? Swami Vivekananda gave an answer which is very interesting. He said, you know, there is a way to read and cover material quickly. Of course, that you don't do for your textbooks. Okay, this is my caution. So what he says, that good authors write in such a manner that if you read carefully the first paragraph, first line, first sentence of a paragraph, and quickly scan your eyes on the rest of the paragraph, then you get a quick picture of what that paragraph is going to give you. Based on that, I can very quickly figure out whether I will need anything from this paragraph for my talk tomorrow or not. So like that, I can quickly go through volumes and pages, pages and pages, volumes and volumes quickly, because I am collecting material for my talk tomorrow. These things I have read earlier. Okay, so now I am doing quick reading with that. So you see, good, this statement I pointed out, I marked, that good authors write in such a manner that from the first sentences of the paragraphs you can get a picture of what that paragraph contains, and if you read through, if the author is good, okay, if the paragraph structure is good, then and then from every first line of every paragraph, if you go through that quickly, you get a good picture of what that full paper contained. So that gave me a poke in my brain that, oh, so is this the way a good author writes? That means that for the paragraph structure is that important, that in the paragraph structure you should have the seed implanted in such a manner that when Swami Vivekananda reads your paper, he gets a picture of the paper quickly, completely, because he doesn't have too much time. So after your introduction section, you come to the sections. How many sections your paper will contain? That is for you to decide. Your paper may have 4 sections, it may have 9 sections, okay, but it should not have only 2 sections, and it should not have 32 sections. Okay, so that kind of thing you should keep in mind. So again, you can have section 2 or the next section depending upon whether enumeration is required or not, and then some other sections, and of course the section structure is supposed to be made logically, not according to the length. But length is also an issue. So as I mentioned here, the sectioning of the article is mostly logical, governed by subject matter. Okay, and the author's intention of the manner of its exposition, in what way you are trying to describe, in what way you are interested in presenting your things. For example, some paper may be better if for every section you include some results, okay, and then later at the end you consolidate. On the other hand, some paper may need you to give the exposition to one aspect, one step of the formulation in section 2, another in section 3, another in section 4, and only in section 5 the whole thing gets consolidated and makes a complete formulation. Then in section 6 whatever results appear, they appear. That is also another possibility. So what will be your manner of presentation, that will depend upon you as the author, okay. Sometimes you find that some section turns out to be too long. In the 16-page paper, if you are writing happily, then it might turn out that one section turns out to be 8 pages long. That is, I mean, if you want to keep it like that, you can. I mean, I cannot ban you from doing that, but it is perhaps not a good idea. If such a thing happens, then examine whether such a long thing should come as a single unit, or whether a subdivision of logical sectioning is possible in that. If that is possible, then perhaps that section 3 can become section 3, 4, 5. Or if logically you think that no, that whole thing should come as a section in my overall scheme of things, you are the boss, you are the author, you can do that. But then in that case you should appropriately use subsections. So all these issues, all these options you have, okay. So if you can split it logically into separate sections, you can do that. On the other hand, on the other case, in the other situation, you can use subsections, and then you keep on writing like this. So if you have done the subsectioning according to that, in the first section you start building the subject matter, in the second logically in a separate unit you continue, and so on, okay. So like this you fill in other sections. By this time your entire thing, your entire subject matter has almost culminated, and now you are going to give results and discussion, okay. So from your work, whether it is experimental or algorithmic or theoretical, whatever results are going to come, that you are going to include here, and you are trying to draw conclusions from them through discussions. Here I find one problem while guiding my students that even though they mention that I name the title, name the chapter or the chapter of the thesis or section of the paper as result and discussion, quite often it happens that what that contains is only results, no discussion, okay. This is a serious issue, okay. If you cannot interpret your results, then how can you expect others will interpret, okay. So results should lead to discussion and should be for discussion. Results alone without any discussion is actually useless. From that, the information content has to be extracted and put in English language, human terms, okay. Now what results, which cases we put in our papers, there is a question. One possibility is that the student has applied the formulation, theoretical or experimental, in 3 cases and putting those 3 results in the paper. This is a very poor work and a very poor paper, okay. 3 cases presented in the paper for with the backup of only those 3 cases at all seen by the author himself is extremely poor. Only when you have seen 200 or 2000 children, studied their psychology in great detail, then only you acquire the capability of writing a book on child psychology, okay. By just seeing your childhood friend Mannu and your own son Tannu, you do not become capable of writing a book on child psychology, okay. So in order to be able to write a paper on this, in which you are actually giving 3 examples, you should have first hand experience with 13 examples at least, okay. So you should have that strategic depth background, that I have run the algorithm or I have conducted the experiment on so many 20 or 50 such cases from which I am picking up only those things which are interesting, which are important, and which convey the message, general message of all these experiments together to the reader. And I am picking up only these 6 cases because there is no need to waste the pages of the journal, there is no need to waste the time of the reader, because the rest of the things, rest of the 24 cases will not give anything extra. Okay. So, take a lot of care to select and present results. Okay. So, not 3 results, because only those 3 results you have, and in those 6 cases or 8 cases that you are going to present, there also you spend some time in carefully ordering and sequencing different cases. The first case can be very textbook type of simple case, which you are using to teach the reader so that he develops the idea nicely. And then next one is, next few results are proper mainstream results, in which all the aspects of your formulation are brought in, and then towards the end you include those cases which have some trouble in that, some singularity, some difficulty, some special case, some degenerate situation. So, those things should also appear as different cases, that in this case this is another issue that appears, and how your algorithm or your experimental organization handles that case, handles that issue, or how it fails to handle that issue. When you are mentioning that how my algorithm handles this issue, then you are showing power of your formulation. And when in those cases where some degeneracy has appeared, which your paper is leaving unaddressed, there you are being honest about the limitation of your algorithm, your work. Okay. So, both of these are important. Thank you. So, the order of the cases taken should be in such a manner that one develops from a low background situation to a high background situation slowly. So, if the 9th case you had put first, then the reader will get thoroughly flabbergasted that, oh my god, so this is nothing, this is dangerous. Okay. So, initially let him develop confidence on the problem, on the theory, on your work, and then develop more confidence on your work by handling of special cases, different situations, and then perhaps be aware of the limitations of your work. Okay. Present results in a manner that a newcomer in the field can appreciate their importance. Okay. Now, I am mentioning even through a casual reading. I don't want my readers to giving casual readings to what I write, but then I cannot ensure that they will read it with so much of attention. So, suppose you write something, when you write something, whether it is PhD thesis or whether it is paper or book, you want your reader to be engrossed in your reading and reading carefully, thoroughly, line by line. Okay. But think how unfortunate it would be for you if your reader actually reads it casually. He reads it casually, his mistake, but he will develop an impression that your paper is useless, and that is a punishment of his mistake on you. Try your best to avoid that. So, therefore, write in such a manner that even through a casual reading your reader gets to appreciate what you have done. Your reader is convinced. That is why when I am making this speech, when I am giving this lecture, so those points which I want you to register, even if you are a little inadvertent, those points, there I am raising my voice, I am using modulation, and I am saying those points by pointing the finger, because I do not want you to go back from here without noticing that I gave you something valuable. So, similarly, when you write a paper, you try to ensure that even if your reader is not a good student, even if your reader is not attentive, even if your reader does not have enough respect for you to begin with, he is reading your paper casually, still some of the message, the central message, he cannot miss, he cannot help to register. You have to keep that in mind. So, the phraseology, the emphasis, the correct use of words, and therefore sometimes using a little dramatics also in the wordings you should put in order to ensure that he doesn't help noticing that this is the message of the paper. Okay. So even through a casual reading, he should not miss it. The reader must not miss your message, even if he is unattentive. Okay. So you have to take it across to him also. If he did not start reading your paper, it was a different matter. But he read through your paper. So for example, some novel you have started reading, after 60 pages you left it and then concluded that it is a rotten novel. It's a lot of injustice to the author. But then you ended up doing it. You could not go across that 60, beyond that 60 pages. One reason why your reader will stop reading it is that he is not an expert in this field. So if you write only those things which you understand and your guide understands, and you know it is correct and your guide knows it is correct, if that is all, then nobody else will read your paper and certainly not understand, because you and your guide have spent years on this particular problem. You know the problem and the solution inside out. Okay. In some cases you may be knowing the lines of your code inside your program, but your reader is novice in the field. Expect him to be novice in the field. He or she does not have your background. Your readers have not gone through all the trouble that you have gone through, days and nights at work. Okay. So that is why he does not appreciate the thing as quickly as your guide does. Okay. So getting the paper through, getting the thesis through your guide is not enough that it is a well readable document. You should get it read by, if you cannot picture yourself in the type of the in the place of the reader. For example, the correct way, the best way is to try to picture that you are the reader who don't know anything. Picture yourself 4 years back, okay, and then try to read and then try to figure out whether I would have understood this thing 4 years back. If not, then some more explanation should go into that. Okay. So use redundancy of information. Sometimes you may say that, yeah, in the text, in page number 7, in paragraph 2, I have already written that. Why did you miss it? I missed it because I was a novice. Okay. So whatever you have put in the text somewhere, either I was inattentive, which was wrong on my part, okay, or I was a novice, which is not wrong on my part, it is just a fact. Okay. I did not notice it. I did not understand the correct implication of that. Why you did not put a table? So you could have put the table. Okay. Now the table is so complicated that another person doesn't understand doesn't appreciate, doesn't get the full picture of the content of the message of the table. Put a figure. Okay. Put a figure, put a table, put text. Now you cannot say that since I have put the table, I don't have to put the text. You cannot say that, because table I will not be able to interpret. So that is my fault. But finally it is your problem, because of my fault I could not interpret the table and therefore considered your paper to be useless, while your paper actually had a lot of interesting things. So that is a loss for me that I did not get the knowledge, but a loss for you also as an author. Okay. So use redundancy of information, utilize the text, tables, figures, sometimes sketches and plots together in order to drive the same thing. Do not defend yourself that since I have put the table in which all the information is contained in some way or the other, I don't have to put a figure. No, don't use that defense. That defense is going to save half an hour for you today, but that is going to kill your popularity by 90%. Okay. So whatever you have written, if you had put a figure also, by which a lot of students, a lot of newcomers would have understood it and appreciated, now because of the table only and not the figure and or not the explanation in a text, they don't get the picture, so they don't feel it is worth reading, okay, or worth citing in their paper. If your paper is not read by many people and cited by many people, then what is the use of it? Your paper does not contribute to the body of human knowledge. Okay. So your paper should be so acceptable to future readers, to juniors, that it triggers new thought from which the progress of science and technology goes forward. That is the purpose of all writing in all aspects, all branches of civilization. So it is your job to convince your reader that your paper has something and he should better read it and better refer to it. Okay. For tricky points, use additional material. For example, I found in my own work that quite sometimes plots cannot describe something very nicely. So for that we had to scratch our brains in a very bad manner to figure out what additional plots, what additional pictures we should develop. For that sometimes we went to our program and included the evaluation of many more things which we have to include, so that he gets the understanding of what a few pictures could not completely communicate. Okay. So for such tricky points, think of what are the additional ways you can get the matter across, get the message across. And this bold letter is warranted. Discuss every salient feature carefully. Through all these cases that you have selected to present, that selection should be based on something that 5 cases of the same type is nothing. That is unnecessary wastage of time and wastage of pages. Okay. So after a point you should include cases which show another aspect, a new situation, a new theme. Okay. So such salient features need to be discussed carefully, but at the same time you should not repeat the same statements again and again. Like in case 3 you are saying that as in case 2, here also the algorithm converged in 74 iterations, giving the solutions up to 0.01 accuracy, and this thing appears in section problem 3, problem 4, problem 5, problem 6. You are cutting that entire paragraph and pasting it in every places. No, don't do that. Okay. So do not be repetitive. So sometimes it happens that similar things you may have to give out in 2-3 different phraseologies, so that the reader does not quit this entire paragraph, that oh, this paragraph I know, and then goes to the other paragraph. It should not happen like that. So you have to avoid repetitive statements, but you have to discuss every salient feature. So the discussion should focus on the salience, not on the similarities. Okay. And of course this we have already discussed, that try spending special efforts on complicated cases. This is one of the very important places where you should spend a lot of time, and understand that whether it is ME or PhD or any work, if you spend 1/3 of your time and effort in writing your communication, your work, it is perfectly fine. Typically students feel that 90% of their time, typically students feel that 10% of the time they study, 80% of their time they work, and then at the end of 10% they write what they have worked and found. This is not right. You should spend 30% for reading and developing knowledge for yourself, based on which background you spend 40% of your time and effort in doing the work, and then finally the 30% time and effort to present it to people. Because if you have spent only 10% of your time and effort, your resources, in presenting to the people the work which you have done with the 80% of your time and effort, that 80% of your work is totally lost, because whatever you could produce with the last 10% in the term of presentation, that is completely lost in the audience. They never read. After the reviewer, nobody else will read that. Okay. So in human knowledge, that will not add to anything. Therefore do less work. Only 40% of your time you actually work, but use the later 30% to communicate it so well that after your work appears in publication, for next 20 years people read through it and get benefited and cite it in their own works. That way your work will acquire permanency and a life. So at the end, the last section typically is conclusions. So in that, typically 2 items should come, whether in 1 paragraph each or several paragraphs, I don't know, I don't want to comment upon that. I would typically put 2 paragraphs. 1 paragraph of a crisp summary of the work, this work, highlighting its contributions, whatever it has achieved, in what way it is going to contribute in human knowledge. So that thing has to be highlighted in this paragraph, and then whatever the follower can work upon should come here. Okay. So future possible avenues of research that can be done in continuation of that. That is either by extending what you have already done, or by addressing issues which you have not included in your paper, both types. And at the end, of course, if there is an acknowledgement, you put that. So expression of gratitude towards any organization or any person from whom this work was benefited. Organization quite often for financial support or the logistic support. For example, when you acknowledge IISc Bangalore, okay, then it is not for funding, of course, it is for the background, okay, or any facility. For example, you are a student of IISc, you take your samples and go to CAT Indore to run those samples in some experimental setup which they have, and from there you collect results, and those results form the backbone of your thesis or paper. So then you have to acknowledge the help that you have got from CAT Indore in using their facility. Sometimes you may also acknowledge the contribution of a scholar, perhaps some professor or some colleague, some student who has at some point given some valuable advice on your work, okay. So that also is fine to any scholar whose technical or editorial input or advice was valuable, okay, in carrying out the work or for even for presenting, okay. Of course, you will have to put a references, which is necessary to provide references in a technical paper, and for that papers, reports, books, etc. you refer. For that the style you will take from the journal where you are planning to publish, and so on. And when you are including this reference, when you are doing the literature review and citing papers and books and reports, then there is a question what to include and what not to, okay. So those papers which are, those works which are of high importance in the field, that you have to include. Those papers which even if not of great high importance in the field, but which are focused towards your problem, you have to include them. And then there will be some middle ground where there will be a question whether to include this paper or not. Typically, if you are seriously bothered about whether to include this paper or not in the references, my advice would be to include it, okay, rather than being inclusive, okay, rather to be inclusive rather than too focused, so that you do not miss out on something which might have been important. And every paper, every work that you have included in the references should be cited in the body of the paper. It should not be that some paper is appearing in the list of references which was never cited in the paper, never referred actually. So it is not clear why you are putting that in the list of references if it is not at all important for the paper anywhere. Finally, there may or may not be an appendix, and if there is an appendix, then it may be one or it may be more. So neither existence guaranteed nor uniqueness, okay. So appendix may or may not be there. If it is there, it can be one or it can be more. What goes in an appendix and why at all one would put an appendix? There are several reasons. Appendix is not necessary to begin with. Whether to have an appendix and what to go in that is also a question of judgment, that is, you decide. So what typically goes in appendix? Some detailed data which in the body of the paper would, you know, hamper the flow of the paper, but which is necessary. So wherever in the context it appears, there you make a mention that now this detailed body of data is given in the appendix, and then you continue with the flow of the matter. That is one possibility. So detailed data which cannot be skipped, but which by appearing in the body of the paper will damage the continuity. So that kind of a thing you put in the appendix, and then in the body of the paper you make a reference to that appendix with the proper context. Sometimes it happens that you feel that some necessary background, if the reader does not have, then he will not be able to follow section 4, section 5, section 6 of your paper. But then that necessary background you do not want to give him as a section of your paper, because that is not your work, okay, or for that matter that is appearing elsewhere in quite well developed way, you do not want to include a full thing there. But then if you do not give it to him in any manner along with your notations, he will not be able to connect it properly. So the textbook may have that topic, but not with your notations with which you are writing the rest of the thing. So a summary of that thing with your notations, the way you are using it, you may be able to, may be interested in putting, not in the body because that is not part of your contributions, but in the appendix, and mention that this is a summary of such and such method, okay, where you are using your notation. So some necessary background which is not a contribution, but which is necessary for the reader to pick up before he can appreciate your paper. Okay, that kind of a thing, brief outline of any method which the reader must be made aware of, similar thing. Okay. Sometimes a flow chart not be common typically. Conclusion is for that person who has read through your paper and now at the end would be reminded about the entire content of the paper in a nutshell. Abstract is for that person who has not read your paper, who based on the abstract will decide whether to read your paper or not. So in the abstract you need to give the picture of the work in such a manner that somebody who has not read through the paper catches the main point and gets interested in reading the paper, and conclusion you write in such a manner that at the end of the paper the reader, because he is reading the paper only once, no, you have written it and 3 times modified it and 4 times read it afterwards, okay, but he is reading it first time, so at the end he would like to recapture what really was contained in this paper, so put it for him. Okay. Now conclusion may not be understood well by somebody who has not read through your paper, okay, but in the abstract you need to capture your audience. So in the abstract that information in that manner should go, which is okay for a general public. Of course general public doesn't mean completely layman, okay, a person from your general technical area who will be able to figure out what is going to be in the paper. Based on that he will decide whether to read the paper or not.
One more. You can ask one. I said not more.
I have one question.
Okay.
You do this very meticulously, and the number of pages becomes very large. How to control the number of pages which is constant?
That is a problem. But then recently I have started advising my students that initially if you are sending it to a journal, then don't do that. Okay, let the page be anything, and let the reviewer or editor say that you have to curtail it. Okay, then we will curtail. Let them first accept the paper, because I am not going to cut my material which I have written, and because of that reason the reviewer will not understand and he will reject my paper. I am not going to take that risk. I tell my students that whatever you think necessary for your reader to understand, put it there and let the journal first accept it. If they accept it, then I am ready to do a lot for them. Cutting things, putting things, changing things, I will do a lot for them if they accept my paper. If they don't accept my paper, I don't accept their page limitations. Okay, so because if you are cutting your pages now, then the reviewer will not understand and your paper will never see the light of the day. So why cutting it here? So I don't cut anything in the beginning. Whatever I think necessary, because I take the reader to be illiterate. Reader does not know anything. So I am putting everything there. Okay. I am putting long explanations, whatever comes to my mind, so that he understands. I am treating him just like a student. Okay. So if a student doesn't know something, my reader doesn't know it. So I am putting it in such a manner that he understands. And after that, if some reviewer says that this is trivial, omit it. Okay, I'll omit it.
Okay. Let's thank Professor Dasgupta.